So yeah, so with that, so you know, the next big thing is, well, if I'm going to lose, you know, 5% or a certain percent of what I'm going to spread, whether treating it or not treating it, um, can I not just spread more and make up for it, rather than, you know, because it's still, there's not a cost of putting all that stuff through my drill, or through somebody's drill. So you know, some growers are willing to risk spreading it versus carrying that much extra in the drill if you need to. So is it, at the end of the day, should they go a higher broadcasting rate to make up for that, or what's kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And the other one guys will say as well, these inhibitors that I just talked about come at a cost. Rather than spending the extra money on those products, why don't I just put that money into a little bit more nitrogen, and then I'm good, right? And yeah, I'd say in pretty much in every case, I wouldn't be a fan of that approach, and it'd be for a couple of reasons. One is, when you look at the cost of the inhibitors that I talked about, on the low end, we're looking at 10, 12% of your nitrogen cost based on today's nitrogen prices. You'd increase you increase your nitrogen cost by 10 or 12%. On the high end, if you look at the more advanced inhibitors, you'd be looking at more like 15 to 20%. And so, I can understand the thought process of, well, rather than spend that money, why don't I just bump up my nitrogen rate by 10 or 20%? There's a couple of problems with that approach. One is simply that, when we take that approach and just apply another 10 or 20% nitrogen, your losses could be higher than that, right? Even by adding 10% extra nitrogen, your losses could be 20, 30, in worst case scenario, 40 or 50%. That'd be fairly uncommon, but it could happen. And so right then you're behind. The other thing about that is, particularly with our agronomy clients where we're tracking our nitrogen and we're fine tuning our nitrogen rates, you end up with a really big unknown there of, we applied 130 pounds of nitrogen, but we don't know if the crop got access to 130 pounds or if it got access to 60 or 70 or 80 pounds or whatever the number is. So then how do you go the next year and say, okay, this is where we saw a benefit, because you don't know what was left behind for the plant. And so it just introduces a really big unknown into a precision agronomy program where you're trying to do things precise, right? And so that's one reason for it. The other is that, when we have losses of nitrogen, they typically end up being lost in a form that's really, really bad for the environment. So when we have nitrates or nitrates that denitrify and go into the atmosphere, those are some of they turn into some of the very worst greenhouse gases that we have, things like nitrous oxide, which have a dramatic environmental effect. And so, I'd be hopeful that most people would not feel good about that prospect. But even from a financial perspective, there is coming a day, and in fact, the legislation is in works. It doesn't mean we know when it's going to come, but there will come a day where those type of activities are penalized and rewarded financially when we make those decisions. And so, one, it's good to kind of be out ahead of it and be doing the right things for the right reasons, but it's also, we might as well start down the road that we know we're going to have to be going down in, a few years time frame. We don't know what that is, but the reality is there's some really bad environmental effects when we make those decisions. So I really would never be a proponent of applying more nitrogen, anticipating the fact that we're going to lose some to the environment. And yeah, in most cases, yeah, it would just be a very bad approach.